Hi all, Tu Lee here, one half of the China EVs and More duo. Lei and I have been brainstorming about different ways to bring you, our audience, relevant and compelling content about the China EV, AV, and mobility sectors, especially now that a number of companies that we've tracked over the 80 plus China EVs and More episodes have become global phenomena. So I'm very pleased to introduce our latest China EVs and More Max episode, where we bring you conversations we've had with special guests from the EV, AV, and mobility space. In this episode, we speak with Dr. Jun Pei, co-founder, CEO of Cepton, one of the world's leading LiDAR companies. Cepton revealed in late 2021, when it filed papers for its SPAC merger, that starting in 2023, it's going to supply up to 9 GM models with its LiDAR technology. With ADAS features becoming ubiquitous now on even mass-market low-price vehicles, it's no surprise that some research firms are forecasting a compound annual growth rate of 19% over the next several years, growing the LiDAR space to an almost $7 billion market by 2030. The future is truly bright for Cepton. Here's our sit-down with Dr. Jun Pei. Apologies for some of our audio issues. Jun, Thank you for having us. And I know Cepton is on the verge of gaining some traction with some clients, and meeting you in person is a pleasure. So thank you. Can you please tell us a little bit about yourself and your company, Cepton?
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming to our lovely Detroit office. In fact, this is my first time to be in this office space. We used to have somewhat a smaller office in the past few years, and we just had a significant expansion. So you see this.
It looks great.
In fact, if you look at all the LiDAR companies out there, I believe we have the biggest presence in Detroit, which is the car place in North America. So, in fact, I was actually having a few meetings yesterday, and was obviously very notable OEM customers, and they were all commenting on this support infrastructure that we have in the Detroit office. So this speaks volumes for Cepton, which is, we started as a LiDAR company 6 years ago. It was the main focus on making LiDARs for the ADAS industry, which is very different. In those days, if you recall, 6 years ago, there was a huge bandwagon of autonomous vehicles, the fully autonomous vehicles will be everywhere in a couple of years, 2018, 2019, right around the corner. Maybe I'm too old. I was just saying that I, came from China many, 30 some years ago. I was, my name is Jun, Jun in Chinese. That's very much of a Cultural Revolution name. I was born in the 60s. So that gives you a little history of my background. With the age and with my, 30 years of experience as an engineer, I didn't believe at the time when we started the company that the fully autonomous vehicles will be anytime soon. But I actually still believed then and now that LiDAR will actually become a safety device first for vehicles, and that the application will be championed in the ADAS industry. And that's where we set up the company to do. The focus, the thesis of Cepton itself is actually to do a LiDAR for everyday vehicles, for consumer vehicles. And actually, I want to correct your pronunciation of Cepton, CEP.
Oh, Cepton, okay, yep.
It's actually not too much of a correction, just an explanation of what Cepton is. At the time when we started the company, we would come up with a name, and the purpose for us is to come up with something that will perceive the world with a 3D fidelity, and that's part of perception. CEP is part of the word perception. And ON is this Latin ending, like electron, photon, atom, an element. So Cepton really implies an element of perception. That's what the company name is. So that's how we started. We want to create an element of perception for the ADAS industry, and that is LiDAR. And that's what we focused on, working on, and put all our money behind this effort, and eventually capturing the Ultra Cruise program from General Motors. That's our flagship program. We have publicized that, and it will be deployed the next year with.
That's really cool. That's very cool.
Yeah, with Cepton LiDAR inside. So kind of in a nutshell, I grew up in China, came to the States in 1989, which is a very notable year for many reasons. Came here as an undergraduate, in fact, studying physics and computer science. Eventually, I graduated from Brandeis in the Boston area, but really hated the weather here. So I'm afraid California has this attraction to me. So I went to Stanford for graduate school, got my PhD there in optical electrical engineering. So that's where I call home Silicon Valley now. And there's a lot of Stanford lineage in our company. My co-founder, Mark McCord, actually, when I was a student at Stanford, he was a professor at Stanford. So, I was, in a way, his student. And later on, we worked, I worked for him. He was my boss at a semiconductor company working in the electron optics area. And one way or the other, after many, many years, we converged and started Cepton together 6 years ago. So, just kind of in a nutshell, very quickly recapping a lot of pieces of history.
Very cool.
Great.
The weather, the time I spent in Silicon Valley, the weather is perfect. 300 days a year. It's between 60 and 90 degrees. And so I miss it a little bit too.
There's the weather, but, I this is my very much personal feeling that there are only two places in the States that I call melting pot, and that's New York City and Silicon Valley, where I grew up in China. I speak with a very different accent than many other of my colleagues and friends. But whether you're from China, you're from Japan, you're from India, you're from Europe. Nobody, when we work together, when we see each other, whether it's in a working place or outside, nobody considers you as a foreigner. You are, a member of Silicon Valley. Same thing in New York City. I feel the same way.
Tell them about the American pie.
What's your story?
So, very quickly, my father was in the South Vietnamese Air Force, and so we were sponsored by a family in Michigan. And I'm the youngest of 8. And so I came over when I was pretty young. I'm old now, so I didn't become a U.S. citizen until I turned 19. And that was right in Detroit at the Federal Building. And so I did my pledge, and the judge was like, now you're as American as apple pie. And he said, don't let anyone tell you any different. And I think that's really important for immigrants to really understand that it doesn't matter where you were born. If you're American, you're American. And it's just, because that was, anyways. But so I thought that was pretty important for me to hear at that time.
Yeah, it's actually a rather touching point. As a company founder, as a business leader in the industry, for me personally, I felt this obligation to support the immigrants, to support the spirit of people coming to the U.S., coming to the Silicon Valley, especially for technical people to realize their dreams. So that's actually continuing. If you look at our company makeup, it's very supportive for high-tech immigrants, especially. And of course, that goes back to my Stanford days. You were just mentioning, actually, my professor who actually signed my PhD thesis, he was originally from Lebanon. So he's already a retired professor at Stanford, but it's a multicultural place that fosters the growth, both in technical and culturally. I think Silicon Valley is this wonderful place to develop technologies. And for me, after I graduated, I spent a decade in a semiconductor company, equipment company to do electron optics. those are the years, I get sharpened my skills both in technology as well as management. And then, as many graduates from Stanford, almost everybody, especially in electrical engineering, had the spirit of starting something of your own.
Yes.
Yeah. So Cepton maybe it's not, it's decades in the making. If you think about your path, right? Because you have to build up that understanding and experience, and then you figure out what to do with it.
Actually,
right?
Yes. On the other hand, it's also everybody's path becoming an entrepreneur is slightly different. For me, I was very much down to earth in terms of working for a company, trying to grow my career path, climbing the ladders, whatnot. But then when I realized I can explore something else, I actually started by exploring small companies first. And then started a small company that actually specialized in optical instrument. Cepton is my second company.
Okay.
So I had a first company that ran for quite a number of years and reasonably successfully made some money for my family in a very small scale. It's a mom and pop shop. There was no investment, no VC involvement at all. It was just me and my wife.
Sometimes that's better because the pressure from external money is
it's a different type of pressure.
Yeah.
You're basically working with your own, family money. So obviously you don't have 9 to 5 mentality anymore. Every day is a working day. Every waking hour is a working hour. So it's a different pressure. You only need to answer to yourself.
Yes.
Which is somewhat. It's an interesting time. So we actually did quite well for 4 or 5 years and accumulated some money, family money. That actually enabled me and my partners and co-founders to cover up the initial funding for Cepton.
Okay.
So the very first batch of small amount of money came from friends and family. Started 6 some years ago, and then we actually realized, this LiDAR industry is going to be big.
Right.
So let's take in some real serious money and expand the team. So we grew. I still remember the day we had our first meeting of Cepton was 4 people, and now we're actually moving towards 200 people now. So it was presence obviously in Silicon Valley as the headquarters, but in Michigan here, in Germany, in India, in China, in Japan. So it's
truly global.
It's a global presence now. Actually, our biggest office outside of Silicon Valley is here in Detroit.
Okay.
So it's quite a journey. Although if you consider 6 years till today, we're a public company now, listed in NASDAQ. We actually captured a very big program from GM, that is sourced for practically next decade. And we're actually sole sourced for that program. All of these seemingly is very fast for 6 years, but 6 years is actually also pretty long period by Silicon Valley standard.
Yes.
So let's get into LiDARs.
Yeah.
How would you describe the current state of the LiDAR sector? And, it's forecasted to grow substantially toward the later half of the decade, right? And we already know competitors, they are also in different programs from different, global OEMs. And when do you think LiDAR will become ubiquitous technology on a smart EV? And at what price point?
So let me basically talk about my view of the current states of the LiDAR industry first. That's kind of your first part of the question. I think I carry, more or less of an insider view of this entire business sector. And there is a history. I actually spent quite a few years working as a VP of engineering at Velodyne in the a dozen years ago. That's my early career with LiDAR, of course.
Well, I read that you were part of the DARPA challenge team?
I was very
I'd
much.
love to hear more about that because I'm a Carnegie Mellon grad in business school.
Oh, you went
business
to
school.
CMU? Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
for business school, and so we learned about that. Red Whitaker and those guys.
Yeah,
so
Yeah. Well, actually, it was an interesting story that I was working in semiconductor industry and trying to explore some other interesting career paths. And one of my hobby interests was looking at the DARPA program and how they competed. And then, through grapevines, I got to know Mr. David Hall, the founder of Velodyne, because he was actually with his brother Bruce Hall playing around with the LiDAR for that program, and they had a Velodyne truck. And somehow we got together and talked about, and basically I ended up working for him. And I actually had a acoustic background from school. And when I started working for Velodyne, a major part of my responsibility was actually working on loudspeakers. If you didn't know, Velodyne for many, many years was a loudspeaker company.
Yes.
Did not know.
Yeah, it was actually.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So my engineering effort was a lot of it was on acoustics. But then LiDAR started more or less as a hobby project. And then eventually I was involved in developing the HDL64, the big...
the bucket.
As we call it, the big spinning doorknob on top of cars. Very popular product. I was surprised how long-lasting that product has been. It's dozen years of continuous production of that thing. We David basically championed, and I worked for him for that process. It was quite a history. But then I actually left Velodyne many years ago to start my own optical company. That's my first company, and ran on that. Only 2016 I came back to this industry, starting Cepton. In a way, actually competing with Cepton, competing with Velodyne on many fronts. But the LiDAR industry, coming back to our topic, has morphed, into, I consider, 3 phases. There will be a 4th phase that I can also, envision and talk about it. The first phase is actually around 2015, 2016 when we started the company, and there's just bunch of LiDAR companies popping up with all the investment into this industry. And that's when I call it is a technology competition phase. That everybody is trying to come up with a new technology and saying that we're the best, and we're no different. We came up with something called MMT, micromotion technology, that I'm sure we're going to talk about it. Yep. And then we all kind of sat in front of the investors saying, okay, this is going to be big. Please give us money. We'll develop this technology, and so on and so forth. So that's kind of a massive scattered technology competition phase. But what is a win for technology? It's not me pumping my chest saying, okay, we have the best best nuts and bolts or best optics, because nobody really understands what that is. The only validation for a technology is a commercial design win. It's a commercial validation. Mm-hmm. So that's where people start to enter into the second phase. There were about 60, 70 LiDAR companies by 2017, 2018-ish. Those 2 years just popping up really like crazy.
With Velodyne really being a leader back then.
At the time.
Yes.
At the time, yes. And then the second phase is really started from 2018, 2019, especially highlighted by the end of 2019, where Cepton was awarded the GM contract. So this is you suddenly go from 70 LiDAR companies down to a handful. Mm-hmm. How many companies would actually have a design win?
Right.
And that would be Innovis, for example, with BMW at the time, and then Luminar was Volvo, and then Cepton was GM. So, of course, GM had the biggest conglomerate of car models and car platforms. that covers basically this ultra cruise platform that will exist in many cars. So we enjoy that quite a bit. So that got us into at least a small pile of companies into the second phase. I call this commercial validation, commercial design win validation of a technology. But after that, I think it's still kind of morphing. There's still some design wins being awarded here and there. The big ones are very rare and far in between. We entered into a third phase. We had the technology competition phase. We had the commercial validation phase. And now the third phase is what we call execution phase. So you have your design win. Like for us, we had the design win awarded to us in December of 2019. What is it now? Almost 3 years.
Yeah.
So with all these time passed is the execution. Having a good technology, a commercial design win award, we need to actually finally make this product so that it exists on cars. It can roll out a production line. And that is certainly not a trivial process. We've gone through, various sample stage. There's A sample, B sample, and we're actually way into the product intent samples. I just came back from Japan a few weeks ago. And you probably...
Oh, there was a conference, right?
No. You're probably aware that our design win with General Motors is with a Japanese tier 1 company called Koito Manufacturing.
I know.
So it's actually a huge backbone for us. Koito Manufacturing partnered with us to capture this GM design win. So we are actually the tier 2 company supplying the tier 1 company Koito, and Koito as a tier 1 company supplying General Motors.
But it was a directed buy from GM.
Correct.
Okay.
So this whole structure is very classical in the automotive industry. Yeah. I do have to mention a few words about why it needs to be a tier 1. Why can't Cepton by itself supply to General Motors? We just make some parts from our contract manufacturers and assemble them in Silicon Valley, maybe ship to GM, Dearborn or other places. Why can't we do that? Well, apart from all the other logistics and production matters, the simple reason for the liability of a safety product, you just cannot be a small company and supply a major OEM.
Did get wiped out?
But the Innoviz Volkswagen relationship is a tier 1.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. So at least they claim to be a tier 1.
That is a different model.
Yeah.
You may actually look at their previous model. I believe Innoviz had with BMW was a Magna. And that seemingly have disappeared from the radar screen, and they are becoming tier 1 themselves. So it's actually in this industry, it's very challenging to work with. More challenging to work with tier 1s than with OEMs, I have to say, because tier 1s are finally responsible for the liability of the product, for the cost, and for basically overall delivery. Yep. So that's a challenging process. But coming back to the execution phase, as I have already mentioned, the entire after you have the design win, to make it into a car production line is a 3 to 4 year process. Not to mention all the details in terms of component procuring, given all the challenges. So you have having the tier 1 being at the front line, managing all this. I mean, Koito has been a supplier for GM for many decades.
Yes.
And that actually established a path for success. And then you still have to work through this validation of your final product, from your supply chain all the way to technical viability. These are just kind of a wheel turning for a good part 3 to 4 years. Then you have a solid product coming out. And the vehicles that we're aiming for is rolling out next year. You probably heard models like Celestiq. So these are the execution phase is. My career is really interesting. When I graduated from Stanford, sorry to digress for a little bit, I was given a title senior research scientist. How glorious is that? It's just so fantastic. I was so in love with my business card. And then, after a couple of years in the semiconductor equipment industry, I became a system engineer. And then I realized that it's much harder to be an engineer than a research scientist. Because one is actually you publish paper.
Yeah, it's like
the other is actually you make
right?
a product.
Yes.
And then another couple of years, guess what? I became a manufacturing engineer. It looks like my career is going downhill.
Downhill, yeah.
But God, it was so much more difficult to be a manufacturing engineer to actually make the delivery. So the analogy there is very much that I realize, having the technology, invent something, patent it at the early phase of the LiDAR industry or specifically for Cepton, is not that difficult. Okay, you just write things and you publish and you file your patent. And then you have a design win. Oh, okay, you need to get into some fighting mode to actually compete with your competitors and really come on top. We did that. That was pretty hard. What's harder is actually the execution phase. Is the manufacturing of these things. I think seemingly my career is going downhill again, but it's not. It's really the delivery. So these three phases, I call it technology competition, commercial validation, and execution. One is harder than the other.
Say what you will about Elon, love him, hate him. No one really appreciated how difficult mass production or mass was or is until he said, building one prototype is easy. Building the same product thousands of times with the same quality and reliability is really, really difficult. And so that's where I don't think Silicon Valley appreciates the legacies very well, because in Silicon Valley, you contract manufacture that out. And so you don't actually get your hands dirty, generally speaking, right? The contract manufacturer manages most of that stuff for you. And so totally agree.
Yeah, so there's a saying, in our smaller circle, that the collaboration or the partnership between Cepton, which is a Silicon Valley company of 6 years old, with Koito Manufacturing of Japan, a tier 1 company in Japan of a 110-year-old, is a very old company marrying a very young company. And actually, this kind of collaboration is indeed a marriage of two fronts. Mm-hmm. One is the frontier in technology development. The other is actually a solid anchor in manufacturing know-how and capability and all the financial backings to make this program successful. So this is where we shine, is these three phases. If you look at the other equivalent design wins, whether it's Volvo with BMW. I mean, BMW announced their design win in 2017. What is it, 2022 now? And I still don't see a BMW car with a LiDAR out there. It will come out, but it's much longer than the 3 years or 4 years we have gone through. So the execution phase is much harder, it's much longer. And, we certainly feel very confident and comfortable almost at this point, seeing, as I went to Japan a few weeks back and actually saw what they call the Cepton production line in Koito Manufacturing. And this is in Shizuoka Prefecture in Japan, south of Tokyo. And you'll see huge production line for our LiDAR, just churning through all the parts.
So they're your CM?
It's not CM. It's actually CM is a contract manufacturer.
Right.
They're the tier 1. They're actually our customer.
Okay.
Yeah. Contract manufacturer would be our vendor.
Mm-hmm.
We actually do use contract manufacturers. So we had some announcement earlier on that we're using Fabrinet from Thailand to make some components as well as sub-modules, sub-assemblies. But then, Cepton would put our stamp on them, whether it's the software, or some know-how in the assembly, and then we provide these over to Koito. Koito is the final assembler. They are responsible for putting these parts together and get them qualified and vouch for their reliability. and the liability overall and deliver to GM. So, the initially all the LiDARs for the Ultra Cruise system will be manufactured in Japan.
Okay. So it's like an assembly line with your Cepton part.
Correct.
Right?
Exactly.
So
they
like
should-
a normal,
Like a normal
tier 1, 2
exact tier system.
Okay.
So this is where I think if you look at the industry right now, we probably enjoy the closest relationship with a tier 1, a traditional tier 1 company, and we certainly didn't venture, with all these this risks and this complexity we just talked about the manufacturing. We didn't think it's best use of our investment money to become a tier 1 manufacturing company.
Right.
Especially
So the Cepton LiDAR itself will be manufactured at the
in Shizuoka factory
Okay.
in Japan,
Okay.
and it will become a Koito product with Cepton's
Inside.
parts and technology, obviously, and then eventually delivered to GM worldwide.
Okay. That's a
So they're licensing your technology.
More than just licensing, not only they license, they actually have to purchase critical components and sub-assemblies from us.
Got
So we're the tier 2. A very good example is that our LiDAR has the MMT technology, all of these things that we publicize. But we said a little bit less about is there's this critical component, ASIC chip,
yes.
that actually is the soul of our LiDAR. That it captures all the signal, calibrates them, and coordinate the structure, and eventually pump out the point cloud. It's all because of this little chip. And obviously that chip is a Cepton product, and we sell it to Koito as part of the assembly that happens over there.
So
So you guys are chip designers too, then?
We are very much of a chip designer, actually. Or you can say the chip designer nowadays is more of a intelligence designer.
Okay, got it.
You fuse all of your know-how into software, firmware, and eventually it becomes a chip that can carry out these tasks in an intelligent way. We certainly don't fabricate the chip ourselves, so we have a foundry that eventually realize our design, and that the chip that I talked a bit about this chip was really fascinating. That has all these functions of analog front end all the way to the we have ARM's core processors at the back end. When these things all come together, it's a sesame-sized chip, 1 millimeter by 2 millimeters, that costs a little over $1 a piece. So this is where we actually can capture the GM win. We can have a price advantage. I mean, this whole LiDAR design thing, we'll dive into that, I'm sure. It's all about how you balance things. If you don't, you have the best image, the best technology that used for space shuttle, no use for cars if it costs more than a few $100s.
I think that was also Omar's point as well.
Well,
you can't have the best or the perfect product. Right?
So we also interviewed Maxwell Zhou, who is the founder CEO of Deep Route, and he has an entire hardware software stack. And he was telling us the solid state LiDARs, I think he put 3 of them, and they were probably less than $800 each. And they're trying to squeeze that down even further to make their hardware software stack affordable to many OEMs so that it becomes standard eventually on even the mass market priced EVs. So,
which is the next part of the question I asked, the fourth phase, the commercialization, the volumes.
That's exactly right.
The ubiquity. How long is that going to take? What's your prediction?
My view on we talked about the first phase, second phase, the third phase, which is the execution phase, is still ongoing, and there are only going to be 1 or 2 companies really that can be successful in the execution phase. So there's another phase, and I simplify it. You talk about ubiquitous or what price range and all that. The fourth, and I feel is the final phase of a LiDAR program, is you got to make money. How about that? I just simply put it as you got to make money.
That's fair.
At the end of the day, if you're not making money, it's not a successful.
You're a science project.
Yeah. So So after all the hardship you've gone through, the initial technology invention, capturing design win, execute program, you still have to make sure that things are balanced out, that you have some profit to be made at the end. And that's will be proven to be even more challenging. It's not only unique to LiDAR industry. Even the car OEMs, at the end of the day, they need to make money. So how much your LiDAR cost is there? If you have I can tell you today, if you have over $1,000 LiDAR, you have no market for it.
Right.
Yeah. So can you actually get the reasonable sales with $500 LiDAR? Yes, the answer is yes. But then the challenge is how are you going to make
reduce your costs?
To get to that point. And of course, everybody has a dream of a $100 LiDAR. So that actually is even more challenging in terms of how to draw a profit out of that.
I remember 2 years ago, or in 2020, the CES that I went, the former CEO of Velodyne, he held up a $100 LiDAR. I thought that was one of those moments, right? But what happened afterwards,
Well, Velodyne story is a completely different topic. We can talk.
But it just makes me think,
I'm still very much a friend of David Hall, but
there's a lot of drama at Velodyne over the last
but that's
2 years,
story.
right? Yeah, that's completely different.
It's interesting industry. I'm sure in the you're familiar with China EV industry. There's a lot of
that's why we're talking.
Man. So that's our sweet spot. We hear a lot of things.
Yeah.
But I think what's important is you're the first person, Jun, that has really talked about how LiDAR is for ADAS. I think most LiDAR companies try to just glaze over the ADAS bridge to level 3, level 4 autonomy. And so I feel the longer that runway is, the better chance the Cepton has to be very profitable, because we're still 15 years away from complete level 4, point to point, at least 15 years.
Why do you say that? Actually, let's spend a few minutes of that 15 years. What makes you think it's going to be 15 years? Well, I don't disagree. I'll tell you my reason in just a little bit, but I'd like to hear.
Well, for me, I won't say it's a random amount of time, but there's regulations, and it's more about you're saying everybody 2 years ago, 3 years ago said it's right around the corner. And how I follow the sector, there's many different use cases, and the ultimate is the robotaxi. But that also means there needs to be plenty of data for every single edge case and use case. And as we're still looking at the pilots in cities like Arizona, and we live in Michigan, right? And so there are going to be many edge cases that still need a ton of data that aren't even being looked at right now. And so...
No, I agree with you 100% there, but I'll elaborate on, the data part, which leads to my reason of coming up was more or less the same. My time frame is 16 years. A little bit more precise.
He's an engineer. You're an engineer. I'm not an engineer.
If you hear me out on the reason of this 16 years, and you'll see there's a logic to it. And I started with a fundamental hypothesis, which I'm sure you'll agree, that when there is a level 4 or level 5 vehicles out there, the fundamental requirement is actually this vehicle is safer than a human driver.
Yes.
So this is a very much, obvious to everyone that if it's less safe than you drive yourself, then you actually drive yourself. So everybody agrees with this hypothesis. So I start from there. Is the safety level of a fully autonomous vehicle has to be higher than a human driver, then you can start looking at the data. You look at 2015, or maybe even a little earlier. The human safety level is here, and your autonomous system is actually down there. 2016, 2017. Every year you can get a little bit data, and I did this exercise and look at, it's actually the trajectory is getting better and better. It's aiming towards that threshold that is actually going to exceed someday, that will become a better driver than human. Then you plot this line and you extrapolate where that is, That's 16 years.
I didn't do that.
That's right.
So I think that's the logic I have, and you can actually, of course, extrapolation is very dangerous. You can have errors.
Sure.
But that's it's not going to be tomorrow.
Right.
Yeah, I think one example I wanted to throw out there is if you look at the example of the Xpeng P5 that was announced as one of the first vehicles with the Levox LiDAR, right? They had the city MGP function announced in April 2021, and that still hasn't become available. They're still doing testing.
Yeah.
And, right, it's going to be probably around 2 years after they announce that this thing will actually, what they call the all scenario, door to door, but it's still L2, right? Because you have to pay attention. That's still not available.
So let me tell you about the other side of this perspective. That is, Cepton, as I have mentioned at the very beginning of this conversation, we started with the aim of delivering LiDAR as a safety device for the ADAS industry. Obviously, our design win, General Motors, is Ultra Cruise is an ADAS function. It's not level 3; it's level 2 plus or level 3 minus.
I think it's similar to the all scenario.
So what's the aspiration there? I have. I'll give you one example from a very notable OEM. Just don't want to disclose the name. That they have the aspiration of the next 5 to 10 years. They didn't want to, accomplish the goal of point-to-point, transportation. They want to accomplish the goal of reducing the accident by 90%.
Okay.
Very specific again, right? So
isn't that a nice goal to have? If you can reduce the accident by 90%, that's 1 out of 10 times. That's from the current status. That's a great thing. So with that, they did a study of what kind of sensors or software and other stacks that you need to do. Obviously, you need cameras and you need radar, and they studied to depth. I think this related to one of your questions, LiDAR or no LiDAR. So they studied in depth of these functions and realized that with camera and radar, you can only reach 50% of reduction in accident rate. The rest of the 40%, you have to fuse it with something else.
Okay.
So it's just like your as a human, your sensor, you have nose, you have eyes, you have ears. These are all your sensory system.
A little redundancy.
Can you live without your eyes, only your ears? Yeah, you can to a certain extent, or without you want the whole sensor to be functional to get to the 90% safety range, and that's where LiDAR kicks in, is to get seemingly a trivial thing is like, okay, the camera and the radar will take the majority of the thing, but it's the minority that gets you to the safety level, that gets you the adoption of such a system. So as you said, it's the edge cases. Those are the most important cases.
Yes.
Not in the everyday.
And I think the other part of the edge cases in the automotive space is that, I almost look at it as an upside down normal distribution curve, whereas the edge cases have the highest potential for fatalities or, serious injuries, because driving in snow, not everybody does it. But guess what? If you lose control, you could hit 3, 4, 5 cars and it could potentially be fatal. And so I think that's an important distinction where most product managers, when they look at edge cases for the iPhone or something like that, it's a nice to have feature that you accommodate this edge case, but it's not going to endanger anyone, right? And so I think many folks don't have an appreciation for this edge case is actually very, very serious, and it needs to be taken seriously before we say there's a point-to-point level 4 robotaxi that you can just get in, order it anytime you want, and it'll drop you off anywhere, anytime, in any weather, or so.
So looking back to the original question, I think LiDAR will be ubiquitous. It will be there for the future of vehicles. There is no doubt about that. Not so much for the grand aspiration of fully autonomous systems, just as an additional safety device that makes your driving experience much more pleasant and much more secure. That device will be there. It will be actually ubiquitous.
It's funny that there is one
automotive manufacturer that doesn't think they need LiDAR. So,
Well, this is another debate.
yeah, that's another conversation to have.
Well, I think there are many reasons for Tesla to speak discredit LiDAR in more than one occasion. I'll just illustrate one. I think there's a lot of non-technical reasons for it. I got my Tesla, the first batch in 2013. It was very first batch.
Yeah.
And it was good, it's a love and hate.
That was right when the S came out, right?
Yeah, right after it came out. But that love and hate relationship is a different, story. But 2015 is the year I realized, Tesla is going to do full self-driving. And when I get the pamphlet from Tesla as a Tesla owner, and I was told if you buy a Tesla, 2015 onwards, all the hardware are there. You just need in future upgrade to have full self-driving.
That will charge you for.
Yeah, sure. But all the hardware, I don't have to bring the car back to the dealer and install a new device to make it self-driving. So all the hardware is there. So that was actually etched in stone. So I'm afraid LiDAR was not there as part of the hardware.
Right.
So it's a little bit boxed in for that purpose. I think there is, a scenario that, when our LiDAR comes out with GM Ultra Cruise with this large volume deployment, and it costs only a few $100s a piece, and it actually can reduce the accident rate by 80-90%. Would you rather pay an extra few $100s for it?
Sure.
I think that question is not even a question. So
I think that's the actual head scratcher, why one person or one company can't just say, you know what, we changed our opinion on this. But that would also mean that they either need to bring in these vehicles and get them upgraded, or change their entire process for autonomous driving. So
I actually wouldn't be surprised if one day that is the reality. We have a change. We have a change of thought process because LiDAR is so prevalent now. We're going to adopt it as well. So I think I wouldn't be surprised if one day that's happening.
Yeah.
One of the privilege I realized that being a founder and CEO of a company is you're free to admit your mistakes. And this is the last worry I have is to claim that I'm doing something wrong. Let's change it because nobody is going to fire me because I admit a mistake. So yeah, I think I do that often. I'm not going to be surprised if others do the same.
So the execution with GM, so there's the ADAS, the safety with the passenger vehicles, and just to confirm, you also have the cruise origin. Is that correct or no? Are you also doing the robotaxi?
No, we're not.
So right now,
because Cruiser, they act like separate entities.
So you're solely
level 4.
You're solely focused on ADAS. Okay.
We're solely working on the projects that will eventually lead us making money.
Okay. So what do you think currently is the biggest hurdle or biggest bottleneck in this execution phase moving on to the next phase? Maybe we'll get into the technology route a little bit, there's OPA, there's MEMS.
Yeah, so it's actually always good to emphasize, the spirit of this company that the thesis was on ADAS.
Yep.
So unlike many technology companies in Silicon Valley that you start with a new invention, a technology looking for application.
Frontier tech.
This is more of, we saw LiDAR has a market for ADAS industry. Let's invent something that's pertinent to be deployed in that industry. That's how MMT, the technology for our scanning, was developed. It's actually, there's a huge focus on a balance between performance, cost, and reliability. After all, we're making a everyday consumer vehicle component. So that's the spirit of this invention, MMT. To make LiDAR, you make your decision of what light source you use, what detection source you use, and eventually how you make imaging. So these are the 3 categories of decisions that you have to make. And for us, for me, I've been studying optics all my life, the first 2 illumination, the laser source, the detection, are the two wheels that's already invented. It was invented in 1960s, so right after laser was invented. You don't have to worry about them anymore. There are still some, this and that work going on there, but for us, in the most practical way, is to pick up the most mature components from these two categories. Specifically, pick the 905 nanometer as our working wavelengths. This is similar to many other LiDAR companies because it's a very cheap, dollar part, automotive grade component. You pick that, you don't have to requalify anything. The detection is the same thing. We use APD, avalanche photodiode, as our detection. It's a silicon diode that's already automotive qualified. Mature components, it's less than $1 a piece. So you pick those and focus everything on how to make an image. And that's where you mentioned about MEMS device, rotating is scanning, like what I did with Velodyne many years ago, and OPA's, championed by Quanergy many years ago. So all these would have benefits and deficiencies one way or the other. And we came up with something called MMT, micro motion technology, and it works like a loudspeaker. Like your voice coil over a magnet, that once you run current, it will actually move slightly. That's what we call micro motion. It's not, if you look at a loudspeaker or subwoofer, you see the motion when it's actually making sound. But instead of putting a paper cone on the voice coil to generate sound, we put an optical array on top. So that starts moving. And just like your loudspeaker, there's no friction, nothing rubbing anything. And the lifetime of this, it is still a mechanical device, just like your loudspeaker. But your loudspeaker actually in your cars outlasts your car.
Right.
And it's a very, very reliable device. And we capitalize on that and employ that technology, which is well over a century old, to the LiDAR industry. And that's the essence of MMT, is a voice coil-driven optical array that formulates the image. So, with that, it was a very unique, Cepton has this patent, worldwide patent over this technology. It's very unique that you don't see any other company do. RoboSense is doing MEMS. Innoviz is doing MEMS, and there are, rotating LiDAR is still quite popular in many applications. So all of these are, there are many companies competing on the same thing. The MMT is very unique. And that's one of the fundamental reasons we captured the design win was this technology that is really low cost. You look at buying a loudspeaker is, dollar stuff, $10 stuff. And then couple that into a LiDAR, then you suddenly have a balance between reliability, performance, and cost.
Right.
And that's another reason Koito can partner with us to manufacture this LiDAR. I mean, they're after all a tier 1 manufacturing company, and every penny is gold to them. Right. They would not venture into manufacturing some component that is actually low yield, difficult to procure. MEMS device is always a custom piece that's sometimes gets into a lot of difficulties. Certainly, we didn't have the courage to go into that route. We want something simple, something robust, something low cost. So that's where we shine. Is we came up with this LiDAR that actually has the capability to hit the sweet spot. So in a nutshell, we certainly feel confident where we are today. Especially we had almost the shortest execution phase, even though it's 3 years in the making, is still the shortest in this industry compared to some of the earlier announcement. And having a tier 1 from Japan, which is a very conservative traditional company backing us, vouch for our technology, back up this production process. I think I sleep very well at night.
That's good to hear.
A couple of things, because I was the commodity manager for graphics for Apple, so I understand the chip making, but I'm also a mentor for some startups, and a lot of founders tend to try to reinvent the wheel for everything. Like they need to be innovative in everything. And, my basic questions are, why wouldn't you buy that bolt off the shelf? Why wouldn't you try to find something off the shelf and then really focus on what you're trying to innovate? And so I think that's a terrific strategy that you're like, this is $1, and we're going to focus on chip design, and we're going to focus on these differentiators that really make a difference. And the second part is, are you finding that you're pushing Koito and GM, or are you guys working together pretty well from a speed standpoint? Because the capital intensive industries tend to be more deliberate with their decision making, because their decision making costs $100 million, costs $200 million, costs $500 million. And so are you finding that the speed at which things are getting done is pretty equal among the three partners?
It's not equal. Mm-hmm. For sure, it's not equal. Mm-hmm. I mean, Silicon Valley companies are very much, high speed, high intensity, and almost at times, or most of the times, it's a rogue operation.
Yes.
Where Koito and specifically GM would be much more of methodical.
Well, and Koito is, Japanese is even more conservative.
Yeah. Oh, by far. Koito, even among the Japanese auto industry, it's considered as a very methodical, very conservative company. So how did we get married? I think it's not equal at all. But the past 3 years of this not only collaboration, it's the deep partnership between us, making the Ultra Cruise program successful, has been very satisfying. So I'll emphasize again, it's a satisfying experience that we actually trade these different thought process, different geographical location and different culture, all of these things. So working together, it turned out to be, again, another balance and a sweet point that we actually strike. It's not only Cepton always champion something that's great and something that will conquer the world, but also a methodical deployment mechanism with a well-established supply chain from Koito. All of these are just wonderful elements coming together. I'm actually happy that we're so different. That gives us, more advantage as compared to others. As you see, there are companies working with tier one, startup companies working with tier one companies. Eventually, the relationship would actually fall apart.
Yes.
For Koito, we came much closer. And you probably realize that Koito invested $50 million into Cepton in the Series C phase. This is before we had the GM contract. They invested another $50 million not too long ago through our IPO process. And recently, they just announced the indication for another $100 million investment into Cepton. So we are getting closer and closer as a very traditional company and a very, frontier Silicon Valley company. You don't find another example.
Yeah.
We enjoy this very much, even though we can be as different as, anybody can tell. Technology company in Silicon Valley, a classic manufacturer in Japan. So, and GM is this another, it's our mutual customer that they actually hold both ends. They're very traditional, very process oriented, but they, at the same time, GM is considered as a frontier technology company as well. Sure. They're the most active in adopting the latest and greatest technologies, and that's why they have the Super Cruise. That's why they will have the Ultra Cruise. They are the first one in the massive adoption of LiDAR. Is a very enjoyable ride so far.
Good. Let me assure you that they're learning as much from you as you are from them, and kind of, because I think on the high tech side, people don't appreciate what automotive grade means. Right? Because you're not going into a consumer's product. You're going into a vehicle that vibrates, that shakes, that has these sudden... and so I think a lot of the Silicon Valley companies that want to get into the automotive space don't understand why there's so many qualifications that need to be done for their product to work on a vehicle.
I want to just chip in the example, for that automotive grade components. If I were asked 3 years ago, okay, what does it take to make an automotive component? I would say, okay, you got to have a wonderful design that balance between cost and reliability and performance. And then you got to, study your temperature sensitivity. You got your shock vibration, all of these things. That's my answer 3 years ago. If you ask me the same question again today, what does it take to make a automotive part? My answer is, you got to have a design win and go through it. Seriously, you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
The answer that I had 3 years ago was so bookish, so classic from an engineering perspective. You actually, that indicates you didn't know what you were talking about. After 3 years, what we have gone through, I started to get a sense of it.
So a quick story. First week in the job at General Motors out of university undergrad, I go into the Warren Tech Center, and there's a 4-man cube, and I'm the 4th person, and this department hadn't hired anyone for 15, 20 years. And so each person in that cube besides me had 35 years with the company. And one of the older gentlemen, we called him Oli, he asked me to come over. He was like, I can't figure out this email thing. He's like, what's going on? And he had a fatal error because we were using Windows machines on his computer. And I was like, you got to turn it off and turn it back on. He's like, I don't get these tech companies, because if we built a car that only worked half the time, we'd be out of business. And so I've really got an appreciation for the automotive space at that point, because it just didn't make sense for him that something wouldn't just work. And so yeah, I think we share an appreciation for how difficult it is to enter the automotive space. And that's not to say that there are some unnecessary things going on that probably hinder the speed or the agility of companies, but there's a fine balance.
Yeah, exactly. That's the balance. And I think this 3-way working together with GM, Koito, and us is finding that balance and hit the sweet spot.
Yeah.
Maybe a couple more questions.
Yeah,
I think we covered pretty much. Obviously, we can't talk about China EVs more without talking about China. So what are the business opportunities there for Cepton? And what is your take on these very aggressive, RoboSenses, Hesai's, Levoxes, Huawei? What do you think of this competitive landscape?
Let me massage that question. Is the GM contract a global contract, or the Koito contract a global contract?
It will cover more than just GM here. Yes.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So, but then it's still
it's still a pertinent question. With Cepton, China market, Chinese competitors, and what's it like for us out there? We have a China office. We certainly have our presence over there, and in a way, we're participating in some of the evaluations over in China over there. To me, even though I grew up in China many years ago, I already kind of very much localized here in the States. So China market to me is a very peculiar place. It's unlike Japan market, European market, or the North American market. And with the recent years, there are also some, for obvious reasons, there's geopolitical, environmental
the business
shifts.
environment part.
It's starting to shift. So what I'm trying to arrive at is right now, to U.S. Or Western companies into China, there are uncertainties. That's what I'm trying to arrive at. There are uncertainties ahead of us.
He's saying
the other way around.
You're saying it very nicely.
And with that said, I think nobody can ignore the China market. It's a huge market. Everybody would like to have a piece of pie, and us included in there. But the uncertainties brings in a lot of considerations. So we are, maybe just quickly jump into the summary. We're moving forward in China, but we're moving forward cautiously.
Yeah, well, and I think so. In 2022, in the global NEVs, new energy vehicles, let's just loosely say new energy vehicles, I think we're going to see China leading the way at around 6.3 million, 6.5 million cars.
6.5, 6.7 probably will be very high up there.
So the global market's probably going to be around 10-ish. And so China will hold about 65% of that market. But I do think, Ford was pretty intelligent by going F-150 first. But I believe, and I've been kind of bringing in some new train of thought, I think GM is going to be a leader because they did clean sheet and said, we're going to go EV platform with all of our new vehicles. And so that's why they're launching the Blazer. So I think there's a huge opportunity for Cepton to grow with GM. I have no idea how GM's going to get to that 30,000 price point and the 40,000 price point yet, because battery prices in the short term are actually increasing. And so I think there's going to be a squeeze on their ability to fund this EV future of theirs. But I think GM's in the best position here, aside from Kia, to really take advantage of the recent excitement about the sector. So, and it's messy. So I think that's where startups have a really good opportunity when things are really messy, right? Because when things are pretty predictable, it's the legacies, the tier ones that really, really shine, right? So.
Yeah, I hope, the pandemic will actually, taper away. Even I say that in the China case, where it's still pretty intensive over there. I'm sure, you share your experience.
Yeah, he just came back. So,
So
I haven't been back since early 2020.
And
so
I'm
I don't
sure,
know.
Having this type of meeting without masks on is probably very enjoyable for you guys. Certainly for me.
It is really, what's the right word? Jarring.
Yeah.
Because sitting in Beijing just a month ago, watching sports, and seeing thousands. We just went to the Lions game.
So 60,000 people. I mean,
Great.
So my sons were at a local school in China, and they're still wearing masks. And we have a QR code, and we have an app.
I heard of that. I'm still hoping that this pandemic will leave us eventually and become a non-issue, and then what you said, excitement will come. Will get promoted in China. There's just too much uncertainty at this very moment. I hope it will actually taper away. And in the coming years, everybody can benefit from the excitement of technology development.
I don't think pandemic is the biggest uncertainty. I think it's other things.
Yeah. So it's a side effect of other things.
The one thing that we can tell you is that China EV Inc. is coming to the United States. And so I think if you have an opportunity to get some more design wins, it's going to create a formidable defense for you, because and what we're hearing is it's a little more delayed than it was, but NIO's already announced they're coming by 2025, and it's going to really drive a lot of UX redesign on the US legacies and the technology stacks. Mm-hmm. How the Chinese EV companies deal with data privacy, data security, the chips is going to be interesting, because is that going to be driven by policy? Is that going to be driven by the sector, the GMs and the Fords? Probably a little bit of both. And we'll probably see a lot of investment from China EV Inc. in North America. So maybe Canada and Mexico. But I would say within the next 3 or 4 years, there's going to be at least 5 or 6 Chinese EV companies that have a small to mid-sized presence in the United States. So
I can't wait for that to happen. I mean, for the foreign car makers to come to the States, there are many, many success stories, especially, like Hyundai, or earlier on the Japanese entering the U.S. market.
Now the Vietnamese.
Vietnamese,
VinFast, they're very aggressive.
And they became very popular and good products for.
They learned, because the Koreans learn fast, right? Koreans learn fast,
So
and let me tell you this. So I don't know if you still drive a Tesla, but the new NIO ET7 and ET5, beautiful. beautiful cars. So
No, I don't drive a Tesla anymore.
BMW.
right, that's right. So I could totally see you in an ET7. Let's just say that, because it's very contemporary, but because the design studio's in Germany.
Yeah.
And so
And there's a big cult of neo investors in the US.
Yes.
So you know,
I'm pretty much done.
one last question.
Okay,
How's the balance sheet? Do you need more money? Are you?
I mean, because manufacturing
you
is
want to make money, but first
manufacturing is the most expensive part, right?
Yeah. So we kind of touched on that point a little bit. That there's a fairly recent announcement for Koito to indicate another $100 million. So we believe we're quite well funded for the GM deployment program. So with that, we're already at the tail end of the deployment, and with this additional infusion of capital, we should be fairly good. But we're not going to stop there, right? We will capture additional design wins.
Good.
And we'll have another 1 or 2 big programs that go through the same process. And with that, we'll need more money to do that. But that's a good problem to have.
Yeah.
And I'll deal with that when that comes.
So the announcements are forthcoming. Is that what you're saying?
That's too much of a leading question.
Yeah.
So
the weird thing is, I was kind of looking at valuations, and Luminar is kind of worth stupid money right now. They're the only company that's the LiDAR company that's like, I have no idea how they're worth so much money, but they're moving aggressively into China.
In China, they have this SAIC commercial, the Feifan auto, right?
But they're gonna feel, and when they enter the China market, that's squeezed too, because the hood size are
That's
really aggressive.
talking about.
Yeah, I think there's a huge push for localization of technology in China. So those are challenges for foreign companies, get us included in there to compete in that market. We shall see. There's still some time. But coming to valuation for Luminar, that's we have a whole session over that.
Yes.
Stock market is a very different animal. As I have, since we became public, there was a few weeks I had the habit of watching our stock price every other hour. I have weaned myself out of that.
Good.
It's actually totally irrelevant because I see completely irrelevant to my daily operations.
Right.
So stock market is its own different animal that works. So I try, of course I have to pay attention, but I only look at it once a day now after closing. So just letting you know.
I think I just think that it's pretty unpredictable because there's these retail investors that kind of get attached to certain stocks that create these artificial valuations, including Tesla. So,
you when you were in China these years, there was this GameStop.
Yes.
Last year.
You must have paid attention.
Well, even BYD lost 30% over the last month because Warren Buffett sold 0.6% of his holdings. So Jun, thank you for spending the last hour plus with us. I learned a ton. I admittedly didn't know a lot about Cepton before sitting down and doing a bit of research the last couple of days. I think Cepton does have a very unique approach to the LiDAR space, and that the focus on ADAS is a lot different than what I've heard from other LiDAR companies. So
thank you again for coming to our office, and I really enjoyed this conversation. I guess if there's a takeaway, from this, I hope you have an impression that Cepton is actually funded by engineers, run by engineers, and doing practical projects.
Yes, which is pretty unique.
Thank you for your time. This is your co-host, Lei Xing. As you've heard from Dr. Jun Pei, Cepton, unlike any other LiDAR supplier, has a unique go-to-market approach by being a Tier 2 supplier supplying to a very traditional Tier 1 supplier in Koito, which manufactures the LiDARs in Japan at a so-called Cepton production line, which are in turn supplied to GM's upcoming Cadillac Celestiq and other models with the Ultra Cruise driver assistance feature. Dr. Pei believes that this three-way working relationship is the best at finding that balance and sweet spot on LiDAR performance, cost, and reliability, whereas supplying a major OEM like GM on its own will be more difficult when it comes to those metrics. For Cepton and many other LiDAR suppliers, it'll still be some time before they move on successfully from the current execution phase to that making money phase, and China remains elusive, and Chinese competition will continue to be a factor in that process. We wish Dr. Pei and Cepton the best of luck.
Lei and I will be sharing more of our conversations with the men and women around the world, moving the EV, AV, and mobility sectors forward as part of this China EVs and More Max series. Some folks will be instantly recognizable, but some will just be people that are doing amazing things in the space that we think deserve to be highlighted. Don't worry though, Lei and I will continue to host our live weekly China EVs and More Twitter Spaces room that summarizes that week's most important news coming out of the China EV, AV, and mobility space. For those that can't catch the live show, you can find the China EVs and More pod on all major platforms or wherever you normally get your podcasts. As EV adoption reaches its global tipping point, it'll be even more important to stay updated on everything that's happening here. Lei and I are confident that China EVs and More is the best resource to do that. Until next time, as always, thanks for listening.